Hey gang, welcome back. I'll talk if you'll listen, episode 35. I am excited for this episode. I'm excited for this topic. And if you recall from last week, I was very hesitant to talk about this topic today, and it's gender identity and gender expression, everything that surrounds that realm. And I have a lot of confusion surrounding this topic personally. So this isn't going to be me expressing anyone's thoughts or opinions other than my own. I may mention a general viewpoint based on my life experiences, but I won't say, hey, this is this specific person's or politicians or celebrities' view on this, because quite honestly, I just want to key in on my area of confusion. And what I'm hoping for is that this will definitely create some dialogue with you all. When I see you all in person, when you reach out to me via social media, via phone call, via an email, however you choose to reach out to me, I'm looking forward very much to the opportunity to create some dialogue, and for me not only express my opinion, but for me to understand this beast. Because say what you want, this is a beast. And if you recall last week's show, part of my me being hesitant came from the backlash that people usually get about this topic, right? For this topic in general, and I'm speaking in general, I know this is a broad stroke of the brush here, but generally speaking, people don't like to talk about this unless they agree with the vocal majority. The vocal majority is the world's most powerful force at this point. The vocal majority brings celebrities to their knees. The vocal majority brings organizations to their knees. The vocal majority sways political landscapes here. We're talking people with two thumbs and an internet connection can go online and say whatever they want and really change the game. And I'm not going to be afraid to express my thoughts or opinions. And more importantly, I want to be really clear what this is for, to express my confusion about certain things. And a lot of people are intimidated to talk about gender identity when they don't understand, because oftentimes they get viewed as a bigot. If they don't understand or agree, there is no room for error. And it really, really bothers me. And it's not necessarily just with gender identity, but with a lot of different things nowadays, especially with social justice warriors out there. If you don't necessarily agree with something, but more importantly, if you don't necessarily understand something, you'll get a lot of backlash. I feel there are a lot of people out there who want to be understood, and there are a lot of people out there who want to be accepted and welcomed into certain communities, and that's totally understandable. But I believe in order to help that occur, in order to lubricate that transition, you need to be comfortable with having a dialogue. As long as all parties involved are not going or coming into a dialogue with malice in their heart. As long as someone isn't coming into a dialogue intentionally with the goal of intentionally hurting someone's feelings. I tell people all the time, whenever I'm having opinionated, or let's just say passionately charged conversations, I tell people all the time, like, hey, look, my goal is to never offend you. I never want to offend anybody. I never want to intentionally hurt someone's feelings. But if you're offended as a byproduct, if your feelings are hurt as a byproduct, then I'm not sorry for that. And I know on the surface that sounds harsh and it may sound a little insensitive or heartless, but I firmly believe in order to educate people, in order to create a healthy dialogue, and more importantly, in order to progress a movement or a topic forward to the next level, to the next stage, you got to be willing to make some people uncomfortable. So I took a step back, and let me first state what my stance on this is and walk you through the process of my thought process. where I stand at right now is there are only two genders. There's a male and female, boy, girl, man, woman, however you choose to, whatever term you choose to use. I believe there are two genders. Now, being transgender is a different topic in and of itself that I'm going to approach soon. But as far as where I'm at right now is there are two genders, man, woman. And how I define that, and I try to base my opinion on biology. I try to base my opinion on as much, that I know medically. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a professor, but just my current knowledge base. That's what I base my thought process and beliefs and opinions on. And I believe you are only one of two things in this world. You're either a man or you're either a woman. Now, how you identify is completely different. And I personally believe that two things can be true. Going into my philosophy on the matter, two things can be true. I believe that someone can be a man or a woman and also truly believe that they're not a man or a woman. And I want to be very, very, very clear. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with people wanting to live their lives the way they choose to live them. I have no problem with people feeling a certain way. I have no problem with a belief system. It's just like religion. I have no problem with what people believe because it does not impact my belief system at all. If people want to go out and transition, if people want to go out and cross-dress, if people want to go out and say, hey, I prefer this pronoun, that pronoun, whatever the case may be, that's fine. That's okay. But it still does not change my stance on you're a man or a woman. You are a male or a female. Now, I would love to have a healthy dialogue about this because I think in today's world, if you go out and say something like that, you're automatically a bigot. You're automatically insensitive. And you're not willing to sympathize or empathize. I would argue, hey, how could you even empathize? But you're unwilling to sympathize with someone's situation, belief system, or journey. And I believe, again, two things can be true. Now, I had to take another step back and go, okay, is this something that bothers me? And I can say with confidence that no, it does not. I've been to gay clubs. I've been to around transgender men and women. I've been around people who prefer to use certain pronouns. And it doesn't make me uncomfortable at all, period. I know the biggest gripe that I've used to have with certain people about going to gay clubs, about straight men going to gay clubs, is because they felt uncomfortable. And you can dive into that with a shovel as much as you want about, why they feel uncomfortable. But point being is, regardless of the reason why they feel uncomfortable, right? They feel uncomfortable. And I took a step back, and quite honestly, we find ourselves in situations where sometimes you never really know something about yourself until you get put into that situation, right? But I can say I am fairly confident that I am not uncomfortable. I am not uncomfortable at all. I once had a woman it was a transgender woman who hit on me, and throughout the conversation, I found out that this was a man, and I was respectfully, oh, hey, I'm not into it, I'm flattered, and kind of like just left it at that. Didn't curse this person out, didn't shove this person, didn't flip out, make a scene, wasn't dramatic about it. It was just, hey, I'm just not, I don't want to go down that path. And I think a lot of people feel like they have to make a huge deal about something. Either you're for it or against it. There's no in the middle. And going back to the whole statement about the vocal majority is oftentimes the whole minority. There are a lot of people who just don't care at all. How many of us have had just an average experience at a restaurant and we didn't go home and write a Yelp review on it? It wasn't good. It wasn't bad. It was just average. There are a lot of people out there who have a stance on gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, etc., who are just neutral. They don't care. They're carefree. They're indifferent. They might have some thoughts or opinions about it, but it's done. It's just done. So after taking a step back and looking at that and going, okay, how do I feel? Would I feel uncomfortable? What do I agree or disagree with? I took the time to look up some definitions, and this is where the meat of the topic comes in at least for me. I am very confused about this. I am very confused with terminology. I am very confused with the vocabulary that people used. I'm very confused or understand certain people's belief systems. And I would just like to have this opportunity to better understand it. So I just want to create a dialogue. So what I did was I went to go look up some definitions. And one of my first stops was to this website called hrc.org, which stands for Human Rights Campaign. And I took a look at some different terms, and there were way more terms than I was familiar with, but not that I just wanted to look at these terms. I also wanted to get some definitions, right? So the first one at the top was sexual orientation, and that's defined as an inherent or immutable, enduring emotional, romantic, or sexual attraction to other people. So in other words, what's your sexual orientation? What are you romantically or sexually attracted to? What gets you turned on sexually? You have to look at that, and that's how you define what your sexual orientation is. I like how that's defined, and although I knew what it meant within context, I think the definition helps to clarify certain people's understanding of sexual orientation, because I believe more often than not, at least based on my experience with people equate sexual orientation to gender, as in what gender that person is. Sexual orientation has nothing to do with your gender. It has everything to do with what you're attracted to. Hell, I'm sure there are people out there who find some sexual attraction to all types of things. You name it, they're attracted to it. But at the end of the day, it has more to do with what you are attracted to than necessarily who or what you are as a person. So then here we have gender identity. Gender identity is one's innermost concept of self as male, female, a blend of both or neither, how individuals perceive themselves, and what they call themselves. One's gender identity can be the same or different from their sex assigned at birth. So in other words, how do you feel like you are? How do you view yourself? What do you believe yourself to be? And I think this is where a lot of confusion, a lot of contention, and a lot of abrasiveness comes in at. Me personally, it's confusion, not confrontation. And I feel like a lot of people who identify with a different gender than what the sex was that they were assigned at birth, I feel like they're afraid, or maybe not afraid, but I think they lean away. You usually get two types of people. You get the people who lean away from the conversation because they feel like anyone who wants to talk about this is aggressive, is a, mean person, mean-spirited person, and they're going to try to make you feel ashamed for feeling this way. That's person type number one. And I think the other person is so gung-ho and so hardcore about this belief system that they intentionally get into confrontations, can intentionally get into arguments about this topic just to shut the other person down. So let's take both extremes, right? Let's take somebody like me who's genuinely curious and wants to be educated and understand someone's feelings about the matter. If you were the sex you were assigned at birth was a man, you were assigned to be a male human, and you grow up, and whether you're 13, 17, 37, or 43, you say, you know what, I identify as a woman, or I identify as neither, right? Take somebody like me who wants to understand that. Hey, let's sit down, let's have a cup of coffee, and let's discuss. I want to understand why you feel this way. I want to understand your belief system. And the reason I want to understand it is the same reason that I want to understand why you want to have kids, or why you want to be married, or why you want to donate to nonprofits, etc. I want to get to know you better as a person. And I feel like the better I am equipped with like whatever knowledge or the better understanding that I have of that person, I feel like I can treat them better as a person. But on the extreme version of that person sometimes goes, what do you mean you don't understand? You have to understand. You should understand. And if you don't understand, you're insensitive, you're a bigot, and you don't accept it. you're of a exclusion mindset. And that's not always the case. There are a lot of people who are just genuinely confused. There are a lot of people out there who have never even heard this topic of conversation or even that thought process before. How many of us ever seen someone do something differently in such a way that we've never done it before? Whether it be something as simple as cooking, something as simple as taking a certain route to work, or something as simple as, saving money via coupon clipping. Oh, I never thought of that. Think about how foreign something like that is to someone who's never seen that. You have some people, the people I don't agree with, who are narrow-minded and they're so affixed on their belief system and are so entrenched in their belief system that they are not even willing to have an open dialogue about the discussion because it's an impossible mindset to have. I don't particularly agree with people like that because you got to be open-minded on the way things are. You got to understand that there's more than one way to do things. And I think about, 70-year-old white man grew up in like Alabama who has never experienced this topic of discussion before. Think about, 35-year-old Asian woman who was raised as second generation Asian and raised in an Asian culture, Asian household, and has never had to encounter this topic of conversation before. Imagine a 52-year-old Indian man who just came over here from India, who maybe have never had who came over here to live with family and may have never been exposed to this topic of conversation before. If these are people who are open-minded, if these are people who want to be good people, these are people who are going to seek out understanding. They're going to want to know and understand why this is the way that it is. They're going to want to be around people like this. What if they have a nonprofit? What if they have a church? What if they have a mosque? What if they're a part of some community group that has people who identify with a gender differently than they did once before? How are they expected to interact or best serve these people's needs if they don't take the time to get to understand them? And I think sometimes they are intimidated by the conversation. They genuinely do want to understand, but they're afraid that, hey, if I ask these questions, if I go down this line of questioning, I'm going to be viewed in a certain way that is outside of my character. And I don't think that's healthy. The next definition that we have is gender expression, which I've never heard of this one before. External appearance of one's gender identity, usually expressed through behavior, clothing, haircut, or voice, and which may or may not conform to socially defined behaviors and characteristics typically associated with being either masculine or feminine. So gender expression and gender identity go hand in hand. So basically, gender identity, I identify as a female. My gender expression is that of a female. So it's that of a woman. So what you are, you literally are what you think, right? In this sense, you identify in one way, so you express that in another way. That's something that I didn't know was a term, but that I've seen, right? I've seen lesbians, I've seen gay guys who come off or convey more masculine or feminine behaviors respectively. And that makes total sense when I apply it to that definition. Then we have transgender, which I think is a point of a lot of confusion here. Transgender is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity and or expression is different from cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. Being transgender does not imply any specific sexual orientation. Therefore, transgender people may identify as straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. So I think a lot of people confuse transgender with gender expression, and it looks to be pretty similar. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I like that definition of transgender. I'm going to go and see if I can look up another definition while I got you guys and girls and other. I'm going to go look up a definition, a different definition. I'm not trying to find one that fits what I'm trying to see. I just don't know if I like that definition. You all can chime in too. Here's another one. Gender transition. Gender transition, the process by which some people strive to more closely align their internal knowledge of gender with its outward appearance. Some people socially transition, whereby they might begin dressing, using names and pronouns, and or be socially recognized as another gender. Others undergo physical transitions in which they modify their bodies through medical interventions. Gender transition. And then let's go back to transgender, an umbrella term for people whose gender identity and or expression is different from cultural expectations. Okay. Now that part of the definition sounds like gender expression. Based on the sex that they were assigned at birth. Being transgender does not imply any sexual orientation. Therefore, see, gender transition, this might be due to my own ignorance, but how I'm defining this, how I'm interpreting this is if you go through gender transition, you are transgender. I mean, that's especially that last part of that where it says others undergo physical transitions in which they modify their bodies through medical interventions. And even the first part of this, the process by which some people strive to more closely align their internal knowledge of gender with its outward appearance. So you can see how this can be confused. I mean, I'm probably going to piss some people off by saying this, but I don't expect how this stuff isn't taught in school. I don't expect how people understand to just pick this stuff up. If you're a transgender person, if you're a person who your gender expression or your gender identity is different from your assigned sex at birth, I mean, you're probably a little bit more entrenched in that culture. So there are going to be things. I mean, you got to help educate. Like this is you guys got to admit this is a bit ambiguous. The last one we have here is gender dysphoria, guys. Check this out. Clinically significant distress caused when a person's assigned birth gender is not the same as the one with which they identify. According to the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, otherwise popularly known as DSM, the term which replaces gender identity disorder is intended to better characterize the experiences of affected children, adolescents, and adults. Ooh, that's deeper than rap. Let's read that again. Gender dysphoria, clinically significant distress caused when a person's assigned birth gender is not the same as the one at which they identify with. Well, if it's in a DSM, I think the most difficult part, especially for psychologists, is identifying gender dysphoria from gender identity, right? It says clinically significant distress. So I guess it has to be some sort of depression or distress on a clinical level. So it has to be diagnosed, which I guess this definition isn't going to go into that. But that's definitely something I'd like to look into a little later. Gender dysphoria. Oof. But I mean, you have all these different terms, right? You have all these different terms, all of these different expressions, these definitions, this vocabulary, and it can get really exhausting and overwhelming and, more importantly, intimidating. It is very intimidating going into a conversation with someone who is very well versed with these terms and these definitions, and or someone who identifies with a different gender than they were assigned, or different gender from the sex that they were assigned at birth, or who is expressing their gender or their sexual orientation in certain ways that you may not be familiar with. It's very intimidating going into entering into a dialogue with someone like that when these are terms that are like all over the place. Now, I promise you this was organic. I promise you this was not scripted. So after I looked up the definitions and after I looked up these terms and I tried to decipher them and understand what they mean, I tried to look up some statistics. I tried to look up some polls, some surveys, stuff to kind of like add context to this, right? And this is stuff that doesn't necessarily support a particular opinion or point of view, but it does add context to the dialogue. So I went on over to different websites and I came across some polls, some data. And the data suggested that people don't understand, or at least don't know, what they identify with until a certain age. And that at one point you can feel a certain way and then completely feel different at another point. What was very interesting to me is two particular studies caught my attention. There was one study conducted by UCLA and they surveyed between the ages of 13 and 17 in 27 different states in the U.S. And then there was another study by the University of Minnesota that interviewed teens specifically in the state of Minnesota. And there was some pretty interesting finds. So UCLA conducted their survey, to which they asked the students basically how, I'm paraphrasing here. If you want to check this out, going on over, just Google gender identity statistics, you'll find this information. But basically, to paraphrase, the question was, how do you identify? Basically, hey, do you identify in the traditional ways in man or woman? And 0.7% of the teenagers surveyed between the ages of 13 and 17. I really want you all to grasp those ages because that's crazy to me. Between the ages of 13 and 17, these people, their brains literally have not fully developed yet. These people are not done with school. These people arguably have not really even experienced life. And I know that's a broad generalization. Everybody's journey is different. But I think that's a safe, educated guess that someone at the age of 13, 14, 15 has a different point of view in life than someone who is 25, 30, or 35. There's just more life to add to your perspective of what life is. These students basically said that they do not identify as with the sex that they were assigned with at birth. So we have 13-year-old boys and girls. We have 15-year-old boys and girls. We have 17-year-old boys and girls who are saying that they are boys and girls, if you know what I mean. You got the girls saying that they are boys. You have the boys saying that they are girls. Or you have them saying that I'm neither. Or I'm both. So that 0.7% covers more than one group, more than one answer. So it doesn't say this percentage said yes, this percentage said I'm, a boy when they're really a girl. This percentage says I'm a girl when they're really a boy. No, they're grouping all that up together as these people just said no. But 0.7%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we don't know what the final number is on that survey. I'm sure I could do some research, but this was a survey done back in 2016. And this was done across 27 different states. So you got all different types of demographics involved in this survey. Then you have the second survey. This one has a little bit more data to go along with it. This one was conducted exclusively in Minnesota. And I've never been to Minnesota, but my perception of Minnesota is it probably isn't quite too much of a diverse state, if you know what I mean. But 81,000 students were interviewed, or surveyed, I should say, and 2.7%, so a whole 2% higher, 2.7% said that they did not identify with the sex that they were assigned with at birth. And these were students in grades 9 and 11. So 9th and 11th grades. So 9th and 11th graders were surveyed, and 2.7%, 81,000, 2.7% said they do not identify with the sex that they were assigned at birth. And I think that's crazy. And I think that if 2.7% of teenagers can be at least at best confused about the gender that they are, I think it's okay for people who don't understand this movement. I think it's okay for them to be where they are. I think it's okay for people like me, for people like you, who don't quite understand the whole gender identity thing, to have an open dialogue and to have a discussion, so that way we can alleviate some of this confusion. I think that's perfectly okay. I'm just thinking about their parents. How do you have that conversation with your kids? Especially that, 30, 40-year-old mom, that 50, 60-year-old dad that has a child who says, I don't think I'm a boy. I don't think I'm a girl. I think I'm both, or I think I'm neither. That's a very, very tough conversation to have. So then it kind of becomes another subcategory, right? You got somebody like me, an adult, independent. At least most times I'm an adult, and most times I'm independent. Can go up to another adult and have a comprehensive conversation about this, and still me be confused, right? With someone who does not have anything to do with my life. Then you have somebody like a parent, a guardian, who is expected to have a conversation with this kid. And then you have a lot of parents out there who, put their children through hormone therapy, and their children, have surgeries and et cetera, and they're 13, 14, 15 years old. And you have some people at that point, even younger than that, they're on hormone blockers and things like that. And I think that's a very, very tough decision to make, right or wrong or otherwise. I'm not going to go down that line of conversation, but I think that's a very, very tough conversation to make with someone who doesn't even know that cooties aren't real. It's just really, really tough. Now, another interesting point to these surveys, another interesting statistic was University of Michigan. So the University of Michigan comes in. Some more interesting data for you here. University of Michigan comes in and reviews these surveys, reviews these polls along with other statistical data. And the University of Michigan has a dedicated human sexuality program. So the people who run and are a part of this human sexuality program was able to report and determine that of all of the students who identified as transgender and who identify as a gender non-conforming person, had poorer health, including mental health, than those who were cisgender. And I just found that out not too long ago what that meant, but basically it basically means that you identify with the sex that you are assigned with at birth. So you are a boy who believes he is a boy, you are a girl who believes he's a girl, etc., etc. The data suggested, according to the University of Michigan's health program, the data suggested that people who identify as transgender or were gender nonconforming had poorer health, overall health, and poorer mental health, which make whatever conclusions you want to make, draw whatever lines, connect whatever dots that are or are not there. I think that's pretty alarming data. And I think that's definitely data that deserves some additional attention. Look, y'all, kids have it rough. They really, really do. I think at times we forget how rough they have it. Think about how rough certain parts of your childhood were, especially mentally, whether it be something as simple as you not being able to sit at the cool kids table, or something as big as the kids bullying you and you get to the point where you're hurting yourself because you're not accepted, et cetera, et cetera. Kids go through a lot. And I think this whole new topic of discussion of gender identity, sexual orientation, and gender expression, it adds more confusion to the typical teenager's life. And I don't think that's healthy. I think kids already have enough to go through. And I think a lot of it comes with confusion. Like when you see, think about it. Think about some of the things where we were exposed to when we were kids. And I say we collectively. Whether you're 21 and you're listening to this, whether you're 45 and you're listening to this, and whether you're 60 listening to this on your daughter's iPod, understand that we were exposed to different things because we didn't have social media. There was actually points in time where our parents did a pretty damn good job of controlling what we were exposed to, only because we only were exposed to what happened in our neighborhoods, what happened within our homes, and what happened at school. And although our parents were not fully aware of what happened at school, there were some general things. But now kids have social media. They can go online and see a building in Syria getting blown up. They can go online and see Kim Kardashian's new whatever. They can go online and see all types of domestic abuse. They can go online and see drug use, et cetera, et cetera. Now they're going online and seeing people that they idolize, people that they look up to, people that inspire them, identify different things, identify with different things, express their gender in different ways, express their sexual orientation in different ways. And you have this 13-year-old kid that goes and sits back and goes, you know what? I really like Kim Kardashian. I really like Kanye. I really like Ellen DeGeneres. This is how this person behaves. I like them, so I'm going to behave that way too. And how much of it is skewed perspective, right? How much of it do these kids actually know about being transgender, or expressing your gender in a certain way, or identifying your gender, or identifying with a certain gender? How many of these kids have gone and done research? Even with me today, I mean, it was a short amount of time, but I went and put an effort to educate myself about this. How many of these kids are just going online, seeing some celebrity or social media influencer identify a certain way with a certain thing and go, yep, that's me now? How many times did that happen? And it really gets me to the point where now I feel like I have to understand. I interact with different people and I want to understand them better. And I do a lot of charity. I'm involved with a lot of charity. And I'm going to be involved with different types of people throughout my charitable career. And I want to understand them better. I don't want to say something that might be disrespectful. I don't want to say something that I don't quite understand. I don't want to be involved in a conversation if this person is going to view me as confrontational just because I'm confused. I think this is a lot to take in. I think this is a lot to look at. I'm happy that I'm comfortable enough to get on here and say this. I'm happy that I feel like I won't be judged, at least not too harshly. I don't know how many listeners I may lose from this. I don't know how many I may gain, and I'm hoping the ones that I do gain are the right ones, if you know what I mean. And to be fair, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Everyone has a right to believe and think and feel whatever they want to believe and think and feel. I just think to say, hey, I won't even entertain your belief because I disagree with it, I just think it's beyond messed up.
Hey everybody, so I do apologize. This last portion of this audio is going to sound a little bit weird. I lost the back half of the recording, and when I tell you I tried to re-record this at least 10 times to make sure it sounded okay and make sure it sounded as similar as it did for the first half. I couldn't get it. I couldn't nail it, and I do apologize. But it's just the last bit. This is pretty much the end of the episode. I just did not want to leave without mentioning two things. The first thing that I wanted to mention is what's going on in my life as far as charity is concerned. So if you don't already know, now you know. I am a Freemason. I am a Mason. And it is quite literally the best decision I have ever made in my life. The biggest thing that Masonry has exposed me to, other than just brotherhood and mentorship, is charity. And the closest I've ever gotten to charity before was going to Walmart, going to Walgreens, going to CVS, and at the checkout it asks you if you want to donate $1 to World Hunger or to like the Red Cross or something like that. I think I've donated blood before too, but that doesn't really count, I guess. I guess it does, I guess it doesn't. But being involved in charity, and my lodge has helped to build scholarships for kids. My lodge has done school drives where we give, supplies to elementary schools. We have taught children how to tie ties and so on and so forth. And it is genuinely one of the greatest joys I have ever experienced. And I didn't even know I enjoyed charity. I didn't even know it was something that I enjoyed so much. So I just wanted to take this time to let you all know what this year we're getting involved with. If you pay attention to my social media, last year I did post some information regarding the Philadelphia AIDS Walk. So there is an AIDS Walk every year in Philly that brings awareness to anyone impacted by HIV and AIDS. The funds raised in the AIDS Walk also helps to go to support emergency funds for anyone who needs emergency financial support who has been impacted by HIV and AIDS. And more importantly, it increases awareness. And I think that's just so cool, so dope to bring awareness to this, especially because you never know who's battling what. We live in a world nowadays where everyone's kind of wearing their own problems on their own, weighing their own problems on their own shoulders, and they aren't really seeking the help that they need. So you never really know who is impacted by what, and participating in things like this really does help to bring awareness. So I will be a little bit more active on social media, letting everyone know the progress of the AIDS Walk. I am walking an AIDS Walk again this year, just like I did last year. And I am taking donations and sponsorships. So even if you want to donate $1, $2, hell, 50 cents, all the way on up to however much you want to donate, my goal is $500. And even if I get halfway there, even if I get a quarter of the way there, that'll be more money than I would have raised without mentioning anything at all. So I will be leaving information in the description below of this particular episode if you want to go ahead and donate or sponsor me for the AIDS Walk. I will be posting pictures just like I did last year. And if you head on over to my Instagram, or if you're friends with me on Facebook, you will see that I even updated my profile picture to the picture that I took last year. We were up bright and early. We met at the Art Institute right at the steps, and we got shirts, and it was a great time for bonding. There was a lot of talking, and I can't tell you how awesome it was just to be around other people. We've seen other fraternities, we've seen other organizations, other sororities, other nonprofits, and it was such a dope experience. So please, please, please participate in any way that you see fit. Again, every little bit helps, and support doesn't always come in the form of dollars or cash. If you can't support monetarily, there may be someone you know who can. So all I ask is that you copy the link and go ahead and share it, whether it be on your Twitter, your Facebook, your social media, your Tumblr, your YouTube, whatever you use. Please get the word out. Again, the description will contain the link directly to my page where you can sponsor. The second thing I wanted to let you all know is, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, I did get some pretty cool feedback from a faithful and loyal listener of the show. And she suggested that I do a little bit more to get you all involved. So I actually did some recording earlier. I did a Facebook Live. I'll also be doing an Instagram Live every now and again. So that way, if you're not friends with me on Facebook, you can participate because my Instagram is a public page. I actually did some pre-show prep. When I visited these websites and I was jotting down my notes, I got my little notepad here with my pen and my paper. And I did actually record that, and I was able to interact with some viewers. I didn't get many. I only went live for about 15 minutes or so. It'll be longer in the future. But I did get some feedback and some participation from people while I was actually researching. And it also is like a way for me to keep you guys around and almost kind of like have some company while I'm working, kind of, before I actually get a chance to record. So I did record that. I did have that go live. I saved those recordings and I post those to my Facebook Patreon page. So if you are a patron, if you do participate in my Patreon and you donate via Patreon, you will get the invite to be a part of that page. And I think that's really, so just some extra content for you all to kind of take advantage of and kind of be around and witness. So again, I go live. When I go live, anyone can see it. But those pre-recordings will get stored on the Patreon page so they can go and look and watch anytime they want to. That being said, everybody, I am going to sign out. Again, I do apologize for the audio. I tried to get this together. I promise next week should be much, much better. I am still learning as this process continues. But up until the next time, as always, I'll keep talking if you'll listen. Take care.